On Mother's Day, I received a card, and my daughter made me read it out loud. Roses are red, violets are blue. You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here. Everyone laughed at me. My name is Grace. I'm 74 years old, and that was the worst humiliation of my life. It was Sunday morning. The sun was streaming through the living room windows when I arrived at my daughter Danielle's house to celebrate my day. I was wearing my favorite green dress, the one that always made me feel elegant. I had brought fresh flowers and sweet treats for my grandkids. "Grandma Grace!" the little one shouted, running toward me. Their hugs filled my heart with joy. For a moment, everything seemed perfect. Michael, my son-in-law, barely greeted me with a quick, dry nod. Danielle came out of the kitchen with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom, so glad you made it. We have a special surprise for you." I sat on the sofa, surrounded by my family. The grandkids settled at my feet, full of anticipation. Danielle pulled a pink card from her purse and handed it to me. "It's from all of us. Read it out loud so everyone can hear." My hands trembled slightly as I opened the envelope. The card had little flower drawings the kids had made. How sweet, I thought. I started to read, in a clear, excited voice, "Roses are red, violets are—" My voice cracked. The next words hit me like punches. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here. Your time has passed. It's time for you to go. Signed, your family who can't stand you anymore." The silence was deafening for 3 eternal seconds. Then Michael started to laugh, a cruel, mocking laugh. Danielle covered her mouth, but I could see she was laughing too. Even the kids, not fully understanding, started to giggle because the adults were. "Did you see her face, Mom?" Danielle said between laughs. "You should have seen yourself, Michael. Did you get a picture?" My heart shattered. Tears began to roll down my wrinkled cheeks. The card fell from my trembling hands to the floor. "It's just a joke, Mom," Danielle continued. But there wasn't an ounce of remorse in her voice. "Don't take it so seriously. You've always been so dramatic." Michael walked over and picked up the card from the floor. "Yeah, Grace, we were just playing around. But, he paused uncomfortably. "Lately, you've been a bit too present. Maybe you should consider other options." "Other options?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Well, Danielle said, sitting in front of me. "There are some really good senior living communities for people your age. Places where you can be with people like you. You'd be more comfortable." The word senior living rang in my head like a death sentence. My own children wanted to get rid of me, like I was old junk. But I thought, my voice was barely a whisper, I thought I was coming to celebrate Mother's Day with you? "And you are, Mom," Michael interjected in a condescending tone. "It's just time to be realistic. You're not young anymore. You need special care, and we have our own lives." The grandkids looked at me confused. The oldest, barely 8 years old, came over and took my hand. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Before I could answer, Danielle pulled him away. "Come here, son. Grandma's fine. She's just being sentimental." I sat there, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. On the day that was supposed to celebrate my motherhood, my own daughter had publicly humiliated me, turning me into the family's cruel joke. I slowly got up, my legs shaking. "I should just go." "Okay, Mom." Danielle didn't even stand up to say goodbye. "We'll call you later." I walked to the door with what dignity I had left, but inside my world had completely fallen apart. That night, in my empty house, I cried until there were no more tears. But something had changed in me. The humiliation had woken up something that had been dormant for years.
It was time for my family to learn the truth about who Grace really was. The next day, I blocked all of them. But first, I needed to remember how I had arrived at such a painful moment. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had nursed Danielle 45 years ago, and let the memories flow like a movie in my mind. It all started when I was 29 years old. Danielle's father abandoned us when she was only 3. One morning, he simply wasn't there. He left a note on the kitchen table. "I can't do this life. I'm sorry." He didn't even say goodbye to his daughter. I remember that night, holding Danielle as she cried, asking for her dad. "Daddy had to go far away, my love," I whispered, promising myself that she would never go without anything. And I kept that promise. I worked double shifts at the textile mill for 15 years. My hands were full of calluses from sewing uniforms late into the night. Every extra cent I saved for Danielle's education. When she was 17 and wanted to study nursing, I sold my mother's jewelry. It was the only valuable thing I owned. But I saw the bright eyes of my daughter talking about her dream, and I didn't hesitate for a second. "Mommy, are you sure?" she asked me that day. "Completely sure, my love. Your education is the most important thing." During her 5 years of university, I worked weekends cleaning offices. I would come home with a wrecked back. But when I saw Danielle studying at the dining room table, it was all worth it. The day of her graduation, I cried with pride. "We did it, Mommy," she said, hugging me tight. "This wouldn't have been possible without you." Later, she met Michael. At first, I liked him. He was polite, hardworking, and seemed to genuinely love her. When they got married, I paid half of the wedding. It was $12,000 that I had saved for years, but I wanted my daughter to have the wedding of her dreams. "Mom, this is too much," Danielle protested when I handed her the check. "Nonsense," I said, smiling. "It's the most important day of your life. You deserve it." When they bought their first home, I gave them the down payment, $25,000. It was all I had saved, but seeing them happy in their new home filled me with satisfaction. Then the grandkids arrived, 2 beautiful little ones who became the light of my life. When Danielle returned to work after her maternity leave, I became their free babysitter. Every day for 3 years, I walked 6 blocks to their house at 6 in the morning. I made the kids breakfast, dressed them, took them to the park, fed them, bathed them, and read them stories. When Danielle came home from work, the house was clean and the kids were happy. "I don't know what we'd do without you," Danielle used to tell me in those days. "You're an angel." But gradually, something changed. The thank yous became less frequent. My opinions about the kids started to be considered as interference. When I suggested that the youngest needed to see the pediatrician for his persistent cough, Michael told me, "Grace, we're the parents here." The first time they spoke to me like that, I stayed quiet. I thought maybe I had been too nosy. Then the subtle comments started. "Mom, you don't have the energy you used to for watching the kids. Grace, I think you got the kids' vitamins confused again. Maybe you should rest more at home." But I kept going every day. I kept helping. I kept giving my all. 2 years ago, when Michael lost his job, I started giving them $500 a month so they wouldn't lose the house. "It's just temporary," they said, "just until Michael finds something better." Michael found a new job 6 months later, but they never told me to stop sending the money. They just kept receiving it as if it were their right. When the kids needed new computers for school, I paid $2,000 without being asked. When Danielle's car broke down, I gave them $4,000 for the repairs. When they wanted to remodel the kitchen, I contributed $8,000. Little by little, I became the silent provider, the one who was always there to solve their financial problems, but who was no longer invited to important family decisions. A year ago, Danielle organized a family dinner for Michael's birthday. I found out by chance when one of my grandkids mentioned the secret party they had. "Why didn't you invite me?" I asked Danielle over the phone. "Oh, Mom, it was a really small thing. Just the four of us. We thought you'd be bored. But I saw the photos on social media. There were 20 people, Michael's relatives, whom I knew well. Everyone had been invited, except me. That night, I cried in silence, but I told myself it must have been an oversight. Oversights became a routine. They forgot to call me on my birthday. They canceled our lunch dates. When I showed up unannounced, they always seemed annoyed by the interruption. But the final straw came 3 months ago. I was at their house helping with dinner when I overheard Michael talking on the phone on the patio. "Yeah, my mother-in-law lives alone. She's getting really dependent. No, she's not sick, but you know how they are at that age. Yes, we're looking at options to move her to a proper place." I froze behind the door. My own son-in-law was planning to get rid of me, like I was old furniture getting in the way. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had given my whole life, all my money, all my love to this family. And now I was just an obstacle they wanted to get rid of. But they didn't know something very important about me, something I had kept secret for decades. My mother, before she died, had told me about a family property in Nassau, Bahamas, that I inherited when I turned 70. It was a beachfront condo that had been rented out for decades. The money had been accumulating in an account I never touched. I also had investments I made with the inheritance from my Aunt Lucille, who died childless and left everything to me. Bonds, stocks, certificates of deposit, money that grew quietly while I lived on my modest Social Security check. In total, I had almost $400,000 that my family knew nothing about. They thought I was a poor old woman living on government handouts. They didn't know I had been discreetly funding their comfortable life for years, not out of need, but out of love. But after the humiliation of Mother's Day, something inside me broke forever. It was time for them to learn Grace's true value. That cruel card was my wake-up call. I stayed up all night on Mother's Day, holding that card in my trembling hands. The words kept echoing in my head. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here." But as the tears dried on my cheeks, something strange started to happen. The sadness transformed into something more powerful. Clarity. Determination. For the first time in decades, I saw my situation with complete honesty. I wasn't a burden. I was the one keeping them afloat. I slowly got up and went to my bedroom. I took a wooden box from my dresser that I hadn't opened in months. Inside were all my important documents: bank statements, deeds, investment certificates. As I looked through the papers, I did some mental calculations that took my breath away. In the last 5 years, I had given Danielle and Michael exactly $67,000. $67,000 that they received as if it were their natural right, while they treated me worse and worse. The down payment on their house? $25,000. The wedding? $12,000. Monthly help for 2 years? $12,000. The kids' computers? $2,000. The car repair? $4,000. The kitchen remodel? $8,000. And hundreds of small expenses that added up to $4,000 more. Meanwhile, I was still living in the same modest house, wearing the same green dress on Sundays, walking to the grocery store to save on gas. But that wasn't what hurt the most. What really broke my heart was remembering how their treatment of me had changed. I remembered my oldest grandson's birthday 6 months ago. I had arrived early to help decorate, as I always did, but when I knocked at the door, Michael opened it with a look of annoyance. "Grace, the party doesn't start until 3. Why are you so early?" "I thought I could help with the preparations," I said with a smile. "We don't need any help. Danielle has everything under control." Behind him, I saw his mother-in-law, Brenda, hanging balloons in the living room. She had been invited to help. I was treated like an unwelcome guest. "I can wait outside until 3, I mumbled, feeling humiliated. "Don't be dramatic, Mom," Danielle said, appearing from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "You can stay, but don't get in the kitchen. You know you get confused." When they purchased their first home, I gifted them the down payment of $25,000, which was all of my savings. Watching them thrive in that new space brought me immense joy. Soon after, my grandkids came along, two wonderful little ones who brought so much light into my life. When Danielle went back to work after her maternity leave, I gladly became their babysitter. For 3 years, every day at 6 in the morning, I walked 6 blocks to their house. I made breakfast, dressed the kids, took them to the park, fed them, bathed them, and read them stories. By the time Danielle returned from work, the house was tidy and the children were happy. "I don't know what we'd do without you," she'd often say, calling me an angel. But over time, things began to shift. The gratitude started to dwindle. My thoughts on the kids began to be seen as meddling. I remember suggesting that the youngest should visit the pediatrician for his lingering cough, and Michael shot back, "Grace, we're the parents here." When that happened, I chose to stay silent, thinking perhaps I was overstepping. Then the subtle jabs began. "Mom, you don't have the energy you used to for watching the kids." Or, "Grace, I think you mixed up the kids' vitamins again. Maybe you should rest more." Yet I persisted, showing up every day. I poured my heart into helping them. 2 years ago, when Michael lost his job, I started sending them $500 each month to help keep the house. "It's just temporary," they assured me, "just until Michael finds something better." 6 months later, he did find a new job, but they never suggested I stop the financial support. It was as if they had come to expect it. When the kids needed new computers for school, I handed over $2,000 without hesitation. When Danielle's car broke down, I gave them $4,000 for repairs. And when they wanted to remodel the kitchen, I contributed another $8,000. Bit by bit, I became the quiet supporter, always there to help them with their financial struggles, yet increasingly excluded from family decisions. A year ago, Danielle hosted a family dinner for Michael's birthday. I discovered by chance that it was a secret gathering, just the 4 of them. "Why didn't you invite me?" I asked Danielle over the phone. "Oh, Mom, it was a really small thing. We thought you'd be bored." But I had seen the photos on social media. There were 20 relatives of Michael's that I knew well, but I was the only one left off the invite list. That night, I wept quietly, convincing myself it was just a mistake. But those oversights soon became a pattern. They forgot to call me on my birthday, they canceled our lunch plans, and when I showed up unexpectedly, their annoyance was evident. Then, 3 months ago, I faced the ultimatum. I was at their house helping with dinner when I overheard Michael on the phone outside. "Yeah, my mother-in-law's by herself. She's becoming really dependent." "No, she's not ill, but you know how they get at that age." "Yeah, we're exploring options to move her somewhere proper." I stood frozen behind the door, shocked. My own son-in-law was discussing how to dispose of me as if I were just an old piece of furniture. That night, I struggled to sleep. I had devoted my life, poured out my heart, my savings, all my love into this family, only to realize I had become an inconvenience they wanted to discard. But they were blissfully unaware of a crucial secret I had kept for years. Before she passed, my mother let slip about a family property in Nassau, Bahamas, something I inherited when I turned 70. It was a beachfront condo that had been rented out for years, accumulating money in a hidden account I never touched. I also had investments from my Aunt Lucille, who died childless, leaving everything to me. Bonds, stocks, certificates of deposit, money that grew steadily while I lived off a modest Social Security check. In total, I possessed nearly $400,000 that my family had no inkling about. They thought I was a destitute old woman reliant on government aid. Little did they know I had been quietly supporting their comfortable lifestyle for years, not out of desperation, but out of love. Yet after the humiliation on Mother's Day, something inside of me cracked forever. They needed to understand Grace's true worth. That cruel card was my epiphany. I spent Mother's Day night clutching it, my hands trembling. The words replayed in my mind. "You're a burden. No one wants you around." But as my tears dried, something within me shifted. Sadness morphed into clarity. For the first time in decades, I confronted my reality honestly. I wasn't a burden. I was the one holding them up. Rising slowly, I made my way to my bedroom and retrieved a wooden box from my dresser, one I hadn't opened in months. Inside were my essential documents, bank statements, deeds, and investment certificates. As I went through the papers, shocking realizations hit me. In the last 5 years, I had given Danielle and Michael exactly $67,000. They received it as if it was their birthright, while their treatment of me became increasingly worse. That included a $25,000 down payment on their house, $12,000 for their wedding, $12,000 in monthly support for 2 years, $2,000 for the kids' computers, and $4,000 for car repairs. The kitchen remodel cost $8,000, but with all the little extras, it added up to another $4,000. Despite all this, I was still in the same modest house, still wearing the same green dress on Sundays, and still walking to the grocery store to save on gas. But what stung the most wasn't the money, it was how their attitudes towards me had shifted. I couldn't help but think back to my oldest grandson's birthday 6 months ago. I arrived early, eager to help with the decorations, as I always did. But when Michael opened the door, I was met with a look of annoyance. "Grace, the party doesn't start until 3. Why are you here so early?" I smiled and said, "I thought I could help." His response? "We don't need any help. Danielle has everything under control." I looked inside to see Brenda hanging balloons, clearly part of the inner circle. It was as if I were an unwelcome guest in my own family home. "I can wait outside until 3, I muttered, feeling utterly humiliated. Danielle soon appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron, and said, "Don't be dramatic, Mom. You can stay, but don't interfere in the kitchen. You know you get confused with recipes." Confused? I had been the one cooking for this family for decades. That day, I found myself isolated in a corner of the patio, feeling like a stranger at my own grandson's celebration. I watched as Brenda assisted with the food and received praise for the cake she had baked. Meanwhile, I, who had contributed half of the party's expenses, was entirely overlooked. When it was time to sing Happy Birthday, I lingered at the back while everyone formed a circle around my grandson. Not a single person noticed my absence in the family photos. Later that evening, as I quietly gathered some dirty plates, my grandson approached me. "Grandma, why were you so quiet today?" "I was just tired, my love," I replied, not wanting to cause him any concern. But then he added, "Grandma Brenda says you're too old for big parties." Those words struck me deeply. How could Brenda, who was merely 3 years younger than I, say such a thing to my grandchildren? Yet despite feeling so humiliated, I continued to provide them with money, continued to assist, and clung to the hope that circumstances would improve. How naive I had been. Then there was last Christmas. I spent nearly $3,000 on gifts for everyone: a new bicycle for my oldest grandson, a tablet for the youngest, French perfume for Danielle, and a power tool for Michael that he had expressed a desire for. On Christmas Eve, I arrived with my arms laden with beautifully wrapped presents. The children rushed to me, filled with excitement. But Danielle... They quickly called the children. "Kids, please place Grandma's gifts beneath the tree, alongside the others. We will open them all together tomorrow." My gifts became lost among the pile of packages they had purchased for themselves. When the moment came to unwrap them, no one acknowledged who had given what. The children vaguely expressed their thanks to everyone for their gifts, yet the most painful moment came afterwards. I had also brought a special gift for Danielle, a pearl necklace that had once belonged to my grandmother. It was a vintage piece, valuable and rich in family heritage. "Mom, it's genuinely stunning," Danielle commented, without even trying it on. "But you know I don't wear much jewelry." "Perhaps you should save it for when the grandchildren are older," she proposed, handing the box back to me without even unfastening the clasp to examine the pearls closely. I had imagined that moment for months, picturing how my daughter would appear wearing the same pearls that had graced 3 generations of women in our family. That evening, in my vacant home, I sobbed, holding the small pearl box tightly. It was not the monetary value that hurt me. It was the complete indifference towards something that came from my heart. My gifts became lost among the pile of packages they had purchased for themselves. When the moment came to unwrap them, no one acknowledged who had given what. The children vaguely expressed their thanks to everyone for their gifts, yet the most painful moment came afterward. I had also brought a special gift for Danielle, a pearl necklace that had once belonged to my grandmother. It was a vintage piece, valuable and rich in family heritage. "Mom, it's genuinely stunning," Danielle commented without even trying it on. "But I don't wear much jewelry." "Perhaps you should save it for when the grandchildren are older," she proposed, handing the box back to me without even unfastening the clasp to examine the pearls closely. I had imagined that moment for months, picturing how my daughter would appear wearing the same pearls that had graced 3 generations of women in our family. That evening, in my vacant home, I sobbed, holding the small pearl box tightly. It was not the monetary value that hurt me. It was the complete indifference towards something that came from my heart. No one asked about my health. It was as if that terrible week had never happened. And now, as I sat with those bank documents in front of me, I understood with painful clarity what my true position was in my family's life. I was not the beloved grandmother. I was simply the emotional ATM. Whenever they needed financial help, there was Grace. When they looked for a free babysitter, there was Grace. When they required someone to blame for their frustrations, there was Grace. Yet when Grace called for love, care, respect, or just a phone call during an illness, Grace was nowhere to be found. That evening, I faced the hardest decision of my life. I took out my old laptop and logged into my online banking for the first time in months. I needed to make some major changes. First, I canceled the automatic $500 monthly transfer to Danielle's account. Second, I closed the joint savings account we had set up for family emergencies, which they had been using exclusively. Third, I updated my will. Everything I had intended for Danielle and Michael would now go to a foundation for abandoned seniors. Finally, I did something I never thought I would do. I bought a plane ticket. It was time to visit the property in Nassau that I had inherited. It was time to start living the life I truly deserved, but before I left, I wanted to make sure my family understood exactly what they had lost. It was Tuesday morning when I set my plan in motion. I had only managed to get 3 hours of sleep. However, for the first time in many years, I felt completely awake and determined. I put on my best gray suit, the one I had bought for Danielle's university graduation, which I had hardly worn. I carefully applied my makeup and styled my hair into a sophisticated bun. I wanted to present myself as the strong woman I truly am, not the dependent elderly woman they thought I was. First, I went to the bank. My financial advisor, Mr. Henderson, seemed surprised to see me so early in the day. "Mrs. Grace, how can I help you today?" I replied firmly, "I need to make several important changes to my accounts." Over the next 2 hours, I completely reorganized my financial situation. I halted all automatic transfers to Danielle's accounts. I closed the joint account we had opened 3 years ago. I transferred funds from my investments into my main checking account. "Are you sure about these changes, ma'am?" Mr. Henderson asked, clearly worried. "These are significant decisions." "Absolutely sure. It's my money, and I have the right to manage it as I choose." After that, I went to see my attorney, Mr. Franklin, who had handled my family's legal affairs for many years. "I need to completely update my will," I stated bluntly. Mr. Franklin, an older man who had known me since Danielle was a child, took off his glasses and looked at me with concern. "Grace, is everything okay? This is a major change." "Everything is perfectly fine. For the first time in years, I have complete clarity of thought." I expressed exactly what I wanted. All that I had previously set aside for Danielle and Michael would now be allocated to a foundation that supports homeless seniors. Furthermore, I created a trust for my grandchildren, which they could only access when they turned 25, and only if they maintained genuine contact with me rather than out of family obligation. Grace, don't you think it would be wise to reflect on this for a few more days? These decisions are permanent. I've had 74 years to think about this, Mr. Franklin, and the last 5 years have given me all the clarity I needed. I signed the documents with confidence. There was no shaking, no doubt. My next stop was the travel agency. I'd spent the entire night researching my property in Nassau. It was a 3-bedroom condo in a beautiful neighborhood. For years, it had been rented out by a property management company, generating income that had been accumulating in a Bahamian account I had never accessed. I told the travel agent that I wanted to fly to Nassau this Friday. "Is this a vacation, ma'am?" "No, it's a journey of liberation."
I purchased a first-class ticket. If I was going to embark on my new life, I intended to do it with elegance. However, before I departed, there was one more task I needed to complete. I had to write the letters. I arrived home at noon and settled at my desk. I retrieved the elegant letterhead I had purchased years ago but never utilized. It was time to clarify to my family what had transpired. The first letter was addressed to Danielle, my beloved daughter. By the time you read this, I will be en route to Nassau, where I will reside in the property I inherited from my family that you were unaware of. I have decided to terminate all financial assistance I have been providing you for the last few years. The $500 monthly support you received has been permanently revoked. The joint account you utilized for emergencies has been closed. Please do not view this as a punishment, but rather as a lesson in self-sufficiency that I should have imparted to you long ago. For many years, I provided you with everything I could offer: my time, my finances, my energy, and my unconditional love. Yet at some point, you came to see me as a burden rather than a blessing. The Mother's Day card was truly the final straw. However, the issues began much earlier, when you ceased to view me as your mother and instead regarded me as your personal maid in a private bank. I have altered my will. My inheritance will now be allocated to those who genuinely appreciate generosity and familial love. Your children will gain access to a trust upon turning 25, but only if they demonstrate they can sustain a sincere relationship with me. Do not seek me out for financial assistance. Do not reach out to ask me to return. Do not send the grandchildren to emotionally manipulate me. If you genuinely wish to have your mother back, you must show that you value me for who I am, not for what I can provide. Your mother who has finally learned to appreciate herself with grace. The second letter was addressed to Michael. Michael, I never perceived you merely as my son-in-law. I embraced you as the son I never had. Yet you transformed me into the awkward mother-in-law you wished to discard. I overheard your phone call 3 months ago when you were discussing finding a suitable place to relocate me, as if I were old furniture obstructing your path. What you failed to realize is that a suitable place has always been within my control. I possess a property in Nassau, investments that yield more income than you earn in a year, and the financial independence to live wherever and however I desire. For years, I discreetly supported your comfortable lifestyle. I covered repairs, assisted with expenses, I addressed emergencies. My actions were motivated by love rather than obligation. However, you interpreted my kindness as a weakness, my readiness to support you as a form of dependency, and my affection as a burden. It is now time for you to become self-reliant. After I finished writing the letters, I placed them in an envelope and set it on my coffee table, prepared for you to discover. Subsequently, I made myself comfortable in my living room, a smile gracing my face. It took me 74 years, but I have finally understood the most important lesson of my life. You instruct others how to treat you based on what you are willing to accept. For many years, I settled for mere scraps of love due to my fear of being alone. However, I have realized that solitude is far more preferable than being in the company of those who do not appreciate me. Now that I have reached this understanding, I find that I am not truly alone. I am free.
I am on my way to Nassau. For the first time in what seems like an eternity, I am genuinely excited about my life.